Who did this? Whose child are you carrying?
I'm scared, please.
Tell me now.
She survived 3 months of marriage to Seoul's most dangerous man by becoming invisible, until the morning sickness made that impossible. But when he found the pregnancy test, the husband who never touched her suddenly wanted to know who dared touch what's his, and the truth was worse than either of them could imagine. Welcome to the channel, lovelies. Please like and subscribe. Aria learned to walk quietly in this house, learned to exist without making noise, without taking up space, without reminding him that she was there at all. 3 months of marriage and she'd perfected the art of disappearing. It was 6:15 a.m. when she started her routine. The kitchen staff wouldn't arrive until 7, which gave her time to do what she did every morning. Make his coffee, brew it exactly how he liked it, dark, no sugar, a hint of cinnamon. She'd leave it on the counter in his favourite mug, the black one with no handle, and by the time he came down at 6:45, she'd be gone. Back to her room, back to being invisible. Seung-jun never said thank you, never acknowledged the coffee or the meals she tried to prepare, or any of the small gestures she attempted in those first desperate weeks. He'd simply drink it, his eyes on his phone, his mind already at his office downtown, where he ran an empire that didn't appear on any legal paperwork. Everyone in Seoul knew his name. Everyone feared it. And she was his wife in name only. The arrangement had been simple. Her father owed money to dangerous people. Seung-jun needed a wife to appear legitimate to international partners, sign the papers, play the part in public, stay out of his way in private. She'd agreed because she had no choice. Her father's life depended on it. But nobody told her how much it would hurt, how the rejection would build up day after day until she felt like she was drowning in a house full of expensive things, but empty of warmth. She tried at first, asked him about his day. He'd nod and walk past her, cooked his favourite dishes. He'd eat at the office, dressed up for family dinners. He'd introduce her as the arrangement, like she was a business deal, not a person. So she stopped trying, stopped hoping, started disappearing. This morning, something felt different, wrong. As she poured the coffee, a wave of nausea hit her so hard she had to grip the counter. The smell that usually comforted her now made her stomach turn violently. She pressed her hand to her mouth, breathing through her nose, willing it to pass. It didn't pass. She barely made it to the bathroom before she was sick, violently, painfully sick. When it finally stopped, she sat on the cold tile floor, confused and scared. This had been happening for 3 days now, always in the morning, always unexpected. She touched her stomach without thinking, a protective gesture she didn't understand yet. And that's when the terrifying thought crept in. But it couldn't be. They'd never even touched. Seung-jun barely looked at her, let alone. The bathroom door was still open. She could hear his footsteps on the marble. He was up early. She grabbed the counter and pulled herself up, splashed cold water on her face, tried to erase the evidence of weakness. Because weakness in this house was dangerous. Weakness gave him another reason to ignore her, another reason to wish she didn't exist. When she came out, he was in the kitchen, standing exactly where she usually left his coffee. He looked at the mug, then at the door she'd just emerged from. For half a second, something flickered in his dark eyes, but then it was gone, replaced by that familiar cold indifference. He took his coffee and left without a word, and she stood there wondering how much longer she could survive being a ghost in her own life. But what she didn't know was that everything was about to change, because the nausea wasn't going away, and soon she'd have to face a truth that would shatter the fragile peace of their silent war. The pregnancy test showed 2 lines, but only one truth mattered. This baby wasn't her husband's. Aria stared at the test in her shaking hands. 2 pink lines. Clear. Undeniable. Impossible. She was sitting on the bathroom floor again, and the 3rd test scattered around her, all positive, all screaming the same truth she couldn't accept. She was pregnant, but Seung-jun had never touched her, not once in 3 months. Not a kiss, not a handhold, nothing, which meant this was someone else's. Panic clawed at her throat. She couldn't breathe. What was she supposed to do? Tell Seung-jun, the man who barely acknowledged her existence, tell him she was carrying another man's baby? He'd kill her. Seung-jun was dangerous. Everyone said so. She'd seen glimpses of it, the cold calculation in his eyes, the way people flinched when he entered a room, the blood she'd once seen on his shirt cuff that he'd dismissed as business. But hiding it seemed equally impossible. Eventually she'd show. Eventually he'd notice. And then what? She wrapped her arms around herself, or rocking slightly on the cold tile. Maybe she could leave. Run away before anyone finds out. But her father, the debt wasn't paid yet. If she left, Seung-jun would collect from her family instead. Her father would die. Her mother would lose everything. She was trapped. Absolutely, completely trapped. That evening, dinner was the same as always. A long table in a dining room that could seat 20 but only held 2. She sat at one end. He sat at the other. Miles of polished wood between them. The staff had prepared galbi and banchan, traditional dishes she'd learned to eat even though nothing tasted right anymore. She pushed the food around her plate, unable to eat. Her stomach was still unsettled. Her mind was screaming. She kept her eyes down, praying he wouldn't notice, praying he'd finish quickly and disappear into his office like he always did. But then he spoke, the first time in weeks. "You look pale." Her head snapped up. He was watching her with those dark, unreadable eyes. His expression was cold as always, but there was something else there. Attention. For the first time since their wedding, he was actually seeing her. "I'm fine," she said quickly, too quickly. "Are you ill?" His voice was flat, clinical, like he was inquiring about a malfunctioning appliance, not his wife. "No, just..." She scrambled for an excuse. "Just adjusting to Seoul. The air is different here." He stared at her for a long moment. She could feel his gaze like a physical weight, could feel him analysing every micro-expression on her face. Then he nodded once and went back to his meal. The conversation was over. She'd been dismissed. But something had shifted. He'd noticed her, and that terrified her more than being invisible ever did. What she didn't know was that his assistant, Taemin, had been keeping tabs. Every movement she made outside the house was reported back. And yesterday's trip to the pharmacy, the one where she'd bought pregnancy tests while trying to be discreet, had been logged, photographed, filed away in a report that would land on Seung-jun's desk tomorrow morning. That night, Aria hid the tests deep in the bathroom trash, burying them under tissues and cotton pads. She stood at her bedroom window, looking out at the Seoul skyline, lights glittering in the darkness like false promises. She pressed her hand to her stomach again, that protective gesture becoming a habit. "I'm sorry," she whispered to the baby that shouldn't exist. "I'm so sorry." She didn't know that across the house, Seung-jun was standing at his own window, a glass of whiskey in his hand, thinking about her pale face at dinner, thinking about how she'd looked almost fragile, thinking about how for the first time in 3 months he'd felt something other than cold indifference, and he hated it, because feelings were weakness, and Seung-jun didn't do weakness. But tomorrow, everything would change. Tomorrow, he'd find out the truth. And the man who'd ignored her for 3 months was about to become the most dangerous thing in her life. Later that night, Seung-jun couldn't sleep. This wasn't unusual. Sleep was a luxury men like him couldn't afford. Trust no one, rest never. That's how you survived in his world. But tonight was different. Tonight his mind kept circling back to her, to Aria, to the way she'd looked at dinner, scared, like she was hiding something. He stood in his office, staring out at the city he controlled through fear and money and carefully orchestrated violence. He'd built this empire from nothing, turned his father's small gambling operation into a network that stretched across Asia. He was untouchable, powerful, alone by choice. The marriage had been strategic, nothing more. Her father had borrowed from the wrong people and couldn't pay. Seung-jun had seen an opportunity. International partners wanted proof he was stable, legitimate. A wife helped, especially a foreign wife with a respectable family name. It added a layer of civility to his operation. He'd seen Aria once before the wedding, a photograph his assistant showed him. Pretty enough. Are educated, fluent in multiple languages. She'd do. The actual ceremony had been quick, sterile. She'd worn white, he'd worn black. They'd signed papers. She'd cried quietly. He'd felt nothing. And for 3 months, he'd kept it that way, maintained the distance, refused to let her become real to him. Because the moment someone became real, they became a liability, a weakness enemies could exploit. But lately, he'd started noticing things he shouldn't. The way she moved through the house like she was trying not to disturb the air. The coffee she left every morning was always perfect. The sadness in her eyes when she thought no one was watching. He'd catch himself looking for her, listening to her footsteps, wondering what she did all day in this empty mansion. It was dangerous. This noticing. This is almost caring. So he'd pushed it down. I ignored it, convinced himself she was just part of the furniture. Until tonight. Until he'd seen her face at dinner and something in his chest had moved. He looked at the clock. 2:47 a.m. He needed sleep. He headed to his bathroom, opened the medicine cabinet for the sleeping pills his doctor prescribed, but he rarely took. The bottle was empty. He remembered then he'd given the last ones to Aria weeks ago when she'd mentioned trouble sleeping. He'd left them outside her door without a word. Maybe she had more in her bathroom. He walked through the quiet house. Their bedrooms were on opposite ends of the east wing, connected by a long hallway he never used. He'd never been in her space, never crossed that invisible boundary. But tonight, he needed those pills. Her bathroom door was unlocked. He flipped on the light. It was cleaner than his, more organised. It smelled like her, something floral and soft that he'd never let himself acknowledge before. He opened her medicine cabinet. No sleeping pills, just skincare products and headache medication. He was about to leave when he saw the trash can. Something pink caught his eye between the tissues. He shouldn't look, should respect her privacy. But Seung-jun didn't respect anything except power. He reached down and pulled it out. A pregnancy test. Positive. His world stopped. He stood there staring at the two pink lines, and something inside him cracked wide open. Every carefully constructed wall he'd built around himself shattered in an instant. She was pregnant. His wife was pregnant. Except they'd never touched. Never even been in the same room for more than 10 minutes. Never kissed. Never consummated this arrangement that was supposed to be purely business. Which meant this baby wasn't his. Couldn't be his. Someone else had touched her. Someone else had been with his wife. The rage that flooded through him was instant and absolute. It wasn't rational. He had no right to this anger. He'd ignored her, rejected her, made it clear she meant nothing. But logic didn't matter. Possession did. And she was his. On paper, in public, in the eyes of everyone who mattered, she belonged to him. And someone had dared to take what was his. His hand crushed the test strip. He could hear his heartbeat pounding in his ears, could feel violence rising in his blood the way it always did before someone died. His mind raced through possibilities. Who? When? That assistant at her father's company who'd looked at her too long at the wedding. Or the driver who'd smiled at her last week? No, she'd only been in Seoul 3 months and she never left the house alone. He pulled out his phone and texted Taemin. I need surveillance on Aria, everything about what she does, where she goes, everything. Now. The response came within minutes. Already compiled. Her pharmacy visit yesterday, pregnancy tests. Report on your desk since 6 a.m. Seung-jun felt something cold settle over the rage. Taemin had known. Had been waiting for Seung-jun to find out. Everyone would know soon. His wife, pregnant with another man's child. The humiliation. The disrespect. He looked at the test again. She'd tried to hide it. Was probably terrified. Planning to keep the secret. Or maybe planning to leave. A dark smile crossed his face. No, she wasn't going anywhere. And he wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. That would be too simple, too quick. She'd made him look like a fool, made him feel something he shouldn't feel. Betrayal from a woman he claimed not to care about. So he'd make her feel it too. Make her understand what it meant to be his wife. Make her regret ever touching another man. He placed the test back in the trash exactly how he'd found it. She'd never know he'd discovered her secret. Not yet. But everything was about to change. Because Seung-jun didn't forgive. And he never, ever let go of what belonged to him. He walked back to his office, his mind already building a plan. A cruel plan. The kind he was famous for in his world. And as he sat at his desk, he whispered to the empty room, who touched what's mine? The answer didn't matter. What mattered was making sure they both paid for it. Starting tomorrow, Aria's invisible existence is over. He was going to see her, notice her, hurt her. And she'd never understand why until it was too late. Seung-jun's Cold War began the next morning, and it started with Hana. He called her before breakfast. Hana Park, childhood friend, business associate, the daughter of his father's oldest partner. Beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way. Poised. Perfect. Everything Aria wasn't. She'd always had feelings for him. Everyone knew it. And he'd always kept her at a professional distance. Until now. Come to the house for breakfast, he told her. We have business to discuss. Business? Hana's voice was surprised, pleased. You never invite anyone to the house. Things are changing. When Aria came down that morning, still pale, still queasy, she found them in the dining room, and Seung-jun and a woman she'd never seen before. The woman was stunning. Designer dress, perfect hair, confident smile. She was sitting in the chair next to Seung-jun, close, touching his arm as she laughed at something he'd said. Aria froze in the doorway. Seung-jun looked up and their eyes met, and for the first time in 3 months he smiled, not at her, at the woman next to him. "Aria," he said, his voice warm in a way it had never been for her. "This is Hannah. She'll be staying with us for a while. Business reasons." Hannah's smile was polite, cold. "You must be the wife. He's told me so much about you." Aria knew that tone, knew what it meant when women looked at her like that, like she was temporary, insignificant. "I didn't know we were having guests," Aria said quietly. I don't need to inform you of my business decisions," Seung-jun replied, and the warmth vanished from his voice. "Hannah will be joining us for meals, working from the house. You won't even notice she's here." But that was a lie. Hannah was impossible not to notice. She was everywhere. At breakfast, discussing territory disputes Seung-jun had never discussed in front of Aria. At lunch, taking calls in Korean too fast for Aria to follow. At dinner, laughing at inside jokes that excluded Aria completely. And Seung-jun was different around her, attentive, engaged. He'd lean close when Hannah spoke, touch her hand when making a point, thank her when she poured his coffee, something he'd never done when Aria poured it. The contrast was devastating. For 3 months, Aria had been invisible. Now she was visible, but only as a comparison. Only to highlight everything she wasn't. The small cruelties started on day 2. Aria tried to use her credit card at the pharmacy. She needed vitamins, prenatal vitamins she'd have to hide. The card was declined. She called the bank. The account had been frozen by her husband. When she confronted him that evening, he barely looked up from his conversation with Hannah. "You were spending unnecessarily," he said casually. "I'm reviewing all household expenses." "I needed—" "If you need something, ask. I'll decide if it's necessary." Hannah watched with barely concealed amusement, and Aria felt herself shrinking, becoming small again. Except now it hurt more because she'd briefly thought things might change. Day 4, he started questioning her meals. She'd skipped breakfast, too nauseous to eat. At dinner, he noticed. "You're not eating," he said, and everyone could hear the accusation in his tone. "I'm not hungry. You never eat anymore. Is something wrong?" Yes, she wanted to scream. "Everything is wrong. I'm pregnant with another man's baby, and you're torturing me, and I don't understand why you suddenly care." "I'm fine," she whispered. "She does look thin," Hannah added, her voice dripping with false concern. "Maybe she's not adjusting well to Seoul. Some people just don't belong here." The message was clear. You don't belong. You'll never belong. That night, Aria lay in bed and cried silently, one hand on her stomach. She was trapped in a nightmare that kept getting worse, and she had no idea why Seung-jun had suddenly decided to destroy her. What had changed? Why now? Day 7 brought the breaking point. Her phone rang. Jake. His name lit up her screen. She was in her room, about to answer, when her door burst open. Seung-jun stood there, and his face was pure rage. "Give me the phone." "What? Why, give me the phone." His voice was deadly. She handed it over, shaking. He answered it. "This is Seung-jun, Aria's husband. She won't be taking your calls anymore. Or any calls. Do you understand?" Aria could hear Jake's confused voice on the other end. "What? Who is this? I just wanted to check if—" Seung-jun hung up. Then he pulled out her SIM card and snapped it in half, threw the phone on her bed. "You don't contact him. You don't contact anyone without my permission. You are my wife. Mine. And it's time you remembered that." "I don't understand," she said, and her voice was breaking. You've ignored me for 3 months. You act like I don't exist. And now suddenly I'm paying attention, he finished, stepping closer. Problem? What did I do? The question came out as a whisper. What did I do to make you hate me so much? Something flickered in his eyes. Pain? Anger? She couldn't tell. But then it was gone, replaced by cold steel. You exist, he said simply. That's enough. He left, and she collapsed on her bed, sobbing into her pillow, because she understood now. There was no winning, no surviving this. He would torture her for reasons she'd never understand, and she had no escape. What she didn't know was that Seung-jun stood outside her door, his fist pressed against the wall, listening to her cry. And he hated himself, hated what he was doing. But the image of that pregnancy test was burned into his brain. The betrayal was eating him alive, and he couldn't stop, couldn't be kind. Because if he was kind, he'd have to admit the truth, that he cared, that somewhere in these 3 months of pretending she didn't matter, she'd become the only thing that did. And that terrified him more than any enemy he'd ever faced. 2 weeks of psychological warfare, and Aria was breaking. She could feel herself splintering, piece by piece, under the weight of his attention, the cruel kind that hurt more than invisibility ever did. Hana had just left for the evening. The house was finally quiet. Aria was in her room, packing. She couldn't take it any more, she was leaving. She was packing what she needed. Not much, just essentials. Clothes that still fit her changing body. The few items she'd brought from home. Her mother's necklace. She didn't have much money, but she had enough for a few nights in a cheap hotel while she figured out what came next. She was folding a sweater when her door opened without a knock. Seung-jun stood there, and his expression was different. Not cold, not indifferent. Something darker, more dangerous. Going somewhere. His voice was quiet, controlled. Yes. She didn't see the point in lying anymore. With a child? The words hit her like a physical blow. Her hands froze on the sweater. Her heart stopped. The room tilted. What did you say? He stepped inside, closing the door behind him. Trapping her. You heard me. Were you planning to leave with a child? Or should I say... His voice turned venomous. Another man's child. The pregnancy test. He knew. He'd known this whole time. Aria felt her legs weaken. She sat on the bed before she fell. How long? 2 weeks, since the night I found the test you tried to hide. He pulled it from his pocket, the same one, crumpled now, carried like evidence. 2 weeks I've been watching you, waiting for you to tell me, waiting for you to be honest. The realization crashed over her like ice water, the sudden attention, Hana, the credit cards, the cruelty, all of it, calculated torture because he'd known her secret. You knew, she whispered. And instead of asking me, talking to me like a human being, you brought that woman into our home. You humiliated me. You broke me down piece by piece. You slept with another man under my roof. His voice exploded, the control finally shattering. Do you understand what that means? You married me, became my wife, and got pregnant for someone else. No, you've got it all wrong. This is all before we got married. So you came to me carrying another man's child. How is that more comforting? I didn't know. She was on her feet now, fury matching his. I didn't know I was pregnant. I'm supposed to believe that? I don't care what you believe. You never wanted the truth. You wanted to punish me. The air between them crackled with rage and pain, and 3 months of words never spoken. Seung-jun's jaw clenched. Who is responsible? Jake, my fiancé. The word tasted like ash. Before everything fell apart, before my father gambled away our lives, before I was sold to you like property to pay his debts. She watched something flicker in his eyes. Surprise, maybe. Or pain. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. 3 months of silence were pouring out. Jake and I were engaged, and we were planning a life together. Then my father made a mistake. Borrowed money from your people. Couldn't pay it back. And suddenly I had a choice. Marry you, a stranger, or watch my father die. So you chose me. His voice was flat. I chose my father's life. There's a difference. She wrapped her arms around herself. Jake and I had one last night together. One goodbye. One final moment before I flew to Seoul to become your convenient wife. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. That night would leave me pregnant. You should have told me. Her laugh was bitter, broken. Told you. When? During one of our many conversations? Oh wait, we didn't have any. You made it clear I was just a decoration. A prop for your business meetings. You never wanted a wife. You wanted a contract. That's not. It's exactly what you wanted. She was shouting now, 3 months of pain erupting. You didn't touch me, didn't talk to me, didn't look at me. I was furniture to you. Less than furniture. At least furniture you'd notice if it was moved. Seung-jun's hands clenched into fists at his sides. You were supposed to be mine. I was never yours. I was my father's bargaining chip. She grabbed her bag, threw in the rest of her clothes. And I'm done with this marriage, with this torture, with you. Where will you go? Anywhere that isn't here. You have no money, no family in Seoul, no... I'll figure it out. Women have survived worse than you. She zipped the bag, hoisted it over her shoulder. Keep your money. Keep your mansion. Keep your fake marriage. And your empty life. She walked toward the door. He moved to block it. They were inches apart. Closer than they'd been in 3 months. Close enough that she could see the storm in his dark eyes. Could feel the heat radiating from his body. His hand shot out, wrapping around her wrist, not violently, but firmly, inescapably. Let me go. Her voice shook. You're carrying a child. Not yours. You're still my wife. On paper only. She looked up at him, defiance blazing in her eyes despite the tears threatening to fall. You never wanted me, never claimed me, never made me feel like anything other than an obligation. So let me go. Find someone like Hana who fits your world perfectly. Something cracked in his expression. Pain, raw and real, bleeding through the cold mask he always wore. What if I don't want to let you go? Too late. Her voice broke. You should have wanted me 3 months ago. You should have wanted me when I was trying, when I was making your coffee and cooking your meals and attempting to be your partner. But you didn't. You wanted distance. Well, congratulations. You're about to have all the distance you can handle. She pulled her wrist free. He let her, his hand falling to his side, like it had forgotten how to hold on. I'd rather raise this baby alone, she said, each word deliberate, final, than stay invisible in your world. I'd rather struggle and survive and build something real than waste away in this beautiful prison, pretending I'm worth something to you. She reached for the door handle. His voice stopped her. Aria. She didn't turn around. Couldn't. If she looked at him, she might break completely. I know I have no right to ask this, but please stay, just until morning. It's raining. It's late. You don't know the city. I'll learn, like I've learned everything else, alone. She opened the door and walked out, Down the hallway she'd walked 1,000 times as a ghost, down the marble stairs that had always been too cold beneath her feet, past the kitchen where she'd made coffee he never thanked her for, through the foyer where they'd first entered as husband and wife, both pretending it meant something. The rain hit her the moment she stepped outside, cold, heavy, soaking through her jacket within seconds. The bag grew heavier with water weight, but she didn't stop, didn't look back. Behind her, in the doorway, Seung-jun stood frozen, watching her walk away. Every instinct screamed at him to follow, to drag her back, to lock her in that house where she'd be safe and his and under his control. He watched until Aria disappeared into the rain and darkness, watched until the street swallowed her whole, and for the first time in his life, Seung-jun felt truly powerless. The door closed. The mansion echoed with emptiness. And he stood there, her wedding ring, the one she'd left on the entry table, clutched in his hand, realizing he'd just lost the only thing that had ever made him feel human. But what would he do now? Would he let her go? Or would losing her finally teach him what wanting her should have taught him months ago? Seung-jun had lived alone for years before the marriage, preferred it even. But now the silence felt wrong, oppressive, like the house itself was judging him for what he'd done. And it's been 3 days since she'd left, 3 days, and he'd convinced himself he'd been right. She'd wronged him, come to him pregnant with another man's child, lied by omission, made him look like a fool. His anger was justified. His actions were justified. He repeated this to himself during meetings that blurred together meaninglessly. Told himself this when Hannah showed up unannounced, with contracts that needed signing, wearing a dress that was too tight, smiling too widely. "I heard she left," Hannah said, sitting in the chair across from his desk. The chair Aria had never been invited to sit in. Probably for the best. She never really fit here, did she? Seung-jun looked up from the documents he wasn't reading. What? Aria, she was always so... Hannah waved her hand dismissively. Lost. Like a child playing dress-up in a world she didn't understand. You need someone who speaks your language, understands the business. Someone like... Get out. Hannah blinked. Excuse me? I said get out, and don't come back unless I call you. Seung-jun, I'm just trying to... You're trying to fill a space that isn't empty. His voice was cold, final. Leave. Now. She left, offended and confused, and he was alone again with thoughts he couldn't silence. By day 5, his assistant Taemin reported her location, a women's shelter on the east side of Seoul, a place for women escaping dangerous situations, running from men who hurt them. The realization hit him like a bullet. She'd run to a shelter, from him. She'd categorized him with abusers, with men who broke their wives down until escape was the only option. Is that what he'd become? He ordered surveillance, not to control her, or so he told himself, but to make sure she was safe. The reports came daily. She'd found work at a small cafe near the shelter, was taking intensive Korean language classes every evening, attended prenatal appointments alone, carrying a folder with pamphlets about single motherhood. She was building a life without him. And it was killing him. Day 7, he broke, sat in his office at 2 a.m, pulled up the security footage from the past 3 months, watched it all, every moment he'd missed because he was too busy pretending not to care. There she was, day 3 of their marriage, attempting conversation at breakfast. He'd barely looked up from his phone. She'd tried again the next day, and the next. Each time, her smile got smaller. Her hope dimmed a little more. He watched her make his coffee every morning, watched her face light up the few times he'd actually drunk it in front of her, watched that light die when he started leaving it untouched. He watched her wait for him at dinner, set his place, keep his food warm, sit alone when he didn't come home. He watched her cry in the garden when she thought no one could see, watched her hug herself, watched her slowly disappear into the background of her own life, and he watched himself, cold, distant, deliberately cruel in his indifference. What have I done? The words came out broken. His phone rang. His mentor, Park Jae-sung, the man who'd raised him after his father died, the only person Sung-jun truly respected. "I heard the foreign wife left," Jae-sung said without preamble. "Want to tell me why?" Sung-jun explained everything. The pregnancy, the betrayal, his justified anger, his righteous punishment. He expected validation. Understanding from a man who'd taught him that weakness was death. Instead, Jae-sung laughed. Not kindly. "You're an idiot." "What?" "You punished her for making you feel something. That's what this is really about, isn't it?" Sung-jun's jaw clenched. "She came to me pregnant, with a child conceived before she even knew your name, before she had any choice in becoming your wife." Jae-sung's voice was hard. "Did you ever ask yourself what her life was like? Being forced to marry a stranger in a foreign country, leaving behind everyone she loved to pay for her father's mistakes. That's not... She tried, didn't she, to build something with you, and you rejected her every single day, made her feel worthless, and then got angry when she'd had one moment of comfort with someone who actually cared about her before her life was sold away." The words hit like physical blows. Sung-jun couldn't speak. "You didn't punish her for betraying you," Jae-sung continued. "You punished her because she made you feel something you couldn't control. Because for the first time in your life, you wanted someone, actually wanted them. And that terrified you. So you destroyed her before she could destroy you." Silence. Heavy. Damning. "She was never the enemy," Jae-sung said quietly. "Your fear was..." The call ended. Sung-jun sat in the dark, his mentor's words echoing, and slowly, painfully, he began to see it. The truth he'd been hiding from. Aria hadn't wronged him. He'd wronged her. From the very beginning. He spent the next week researching, really researching, her father's debts. He paid them all, anonymously, ensured the family would never be leveraged again. Jake, he discovered the man had married someone else 6 months ago, moved to London, had never tried to contact Aria after that one intercepted call. She'd been telling the truth, about all of it. He sent money to the women's shelter where she was staying, large amounts, anonymously, made sure it went to helping women rebuild their lives, and he did something he'd never done before, something that went against everything he'd been taught. He found a therapist, a real one, not a business counsellor, someone who dealt with trauma and control, and fear masquerading as strength. The first session was humiliating. Sitting in an office, admitting weakness to a stranger. But his therapist, Dr. Kim, didn't judge. "You were raised in a world where love equals vulnerability," Dr. Kim said. "Where caring about someone gives them power to hurt you. So you learn to feel nothing. But Aria threatened that, made you feel without your permission." "I destroyed her." Sung-jun's voice was hollow. "Yes, you did. The question is, can you become someone different? Someone worthy of a second chance?" Could he? Sung-jun didn't know, but for the first time in his life, he wanted to try. Not to own her, not to control her, but to actually deserve her. He attended sessions twice a week, learned about his attachment issues, his fear of abandonment, his need for control as armour against pain. He learned that change was possible, but required consistent action, not grand gestures. 3 months passed. He worked on himself in ways that felt impossible, uncomfortable, but necessary. And every night he looked at the reports of her progress. She was learning Korean fluently now. Her baby bump was visible. She'd made friends at the cafe, was laughing again in the security photos. She was happy, without him. The realization should have hurt, but instead it gave him hope. Because if she could be happy without him, maybe, just maybe, she could choose to be happy with him. Not because she was trapped, not because she had no other option, but because she wanted to. He began planning. Not a grand gesture, not a show of wealth or power. Something simple, honest. The hardest thing he'd ever done. He would go to her, with nothing but the truth. And if she rejected him, he'd accept it. Because that's what love actually was. Letting someone choose freely, even if they chose to walk away. But would she listen? Could he prove he'd changed enough to deserve even a conversation? 3 months. Aria had survived 3 months on her own, and it felt like a lifetime. The cafe job was hard. Standing for hours while pregnant wasn't easy. But her co-workers were kind. The Korean she was learning helped her connect with customers. The small apartment she'd moved into from the shelter was cramped, but hers. She was 5 months pregnant now. The baby moved constantly, little flutters that reminded her she wasn't really alone. She'd stopped thinking about Seongjun every day, then every other day. The pain was fading into something manageable. Acceptance, maybe. She was wiping down tables after closing when the bell above the door chimed. Her manager had left. She was alone. "We're closed," she called in Korean, proud of how natural it sounded now. "I know." She froze. That voice, deep, familiar. The voice that had haunted her dreams and nightmares for months. She turned. Seongjun stood in the doorway, but he looked different. No expensive suit, just jeans and a simple sweater. No guards outside, no power play in his stance. He looked smaller, human, tired. "What are you doing here?" Her hand went instinctively to her stomach, protective. "I came to talk, just talk, if you'll let me. I don't have anything to say to you. I know, but I have things to say to you. Please, 5 minutes." She should say no, should tell him to leave. But something in his expression stopped her. He wasn't demanding. He was asking, actually asking. 5 minutes, she said. "Then you leave." He nodded, stepped inside, but kept his distance, as respectful of her space in a way he'd never been before. "I was wrong." The words came out quietly. "About everything. The way I treated you. The way I punished you for making me feel things I didn't know how to handle. I was cruel. And I'm sorry." Aria crossed her arms. "Sorry doesn't fix 3 months of torture." "I know. That's why I'm not asking for forgiveness. I'm just asking you to hear the truth." He took a breath. "I was afraid of wanting you. From the moment you walked into that contract signing, something in me shifted. You were beautiful and intelligent and kind, and I knew if I let myself care about you, you'd have power over me, power to hurt me, so I convinced myself you didn't matter." "But I did matter." "You did. You mattered so much it terrified me. So I pushed you away, ignored you, and pretended you were invisible. And then I saw that pregnancy test, And all that fear turned into rage because I'd already lost you to someone else before I even had you. Aria's eyes stung with tears, and she refused to let it fall. You never tried to have me. I know, and that's my failure, not yours. You tried every day. You reached out, and I was too much of a coward to reach back. He paused. I've been in therapy, real therapy, learning why I am the way I am, learning how to be different. People don't change that fast. You're right, I'm not changed. I'm changing, every day, and I'll keep changing whether you give me another chance or not, because I need to be better, not just for you, for myself. She studied him, looking for manipulation, for the cold calculation she'd learned to recognise, but all she saw was honesty, raw and painful, real. What do you want from me? She asked. Nothing you're not willing to give? I want honesty, presence, a real conversation. I want to know you, who you actually are, not who I assumed you to be, and I want you to know me, the real me, not the armour. And the baby. He looked at her stomach, and something soft crossed his face. That baby is part of you, which means I already care about them, not because of genetics or ownership, but because they matter to you. Aria felt something crack in her chest, the wall she'd built for protection. I have conditions, she said. If, and this is a massive if, we're going to even attempt to talk, to build anything, I have conditions. Tell me. Honesty, always, no games, no tests. If you have a question, ask me. Don't manipulate me into answering. Done. Therapy. And you keep going. I need to see consistent effort, not just words. I've been going twice a week for 3 months. I'll continue. Separate spaces. I'm not moving back into that mansion. If we're building something, we build it slowly, on equal ground. I'll find an apartment near yours. Small, normal. We'll take it slow. My career, my choices. You don't get to control my life. Your life is yours. I'm just asking to be part of it, if you choose that. She walked closer, looking up at him. Why should I believe you? Why should I risk this again? Because I'm not asking you to risk anything. I'm asking you to let me prove it, day by day, action by action. No grand gestures, just consistent presence. And if I fail, if I slip back into old patterns, you walk away. No guilt, no obligation. She wanted to say no, and wanted to protect herself. But she'd learned something in 3 months of surviving alone. She was stronger than she'd thought. Strong enough to set boundaries. Strong enough to demand what she deserved. Okay, she said. We'll try. Slowly. The relief in his eyes was palpable. Thank you. What followed was months of careful rebuilding. He rented an apartment 2 blocks from hers. Small, nothing like the mansion. He learned to cook, badly, but improved. They took Korean lessons together, him relearning the language he'd always known, her finally feeling like she belonged. He attended every prenatal appointment, sat in uncomfortable plastic chairs in clinic waiting rooms, held her hand during ultrasounds, asked questions about fetal development like it was the most important business meeting of his life. They cooked together in her tiny kitchen. Talked about real things. Childhood fears, favourite books, dreams they'd never shared. He told her about his father's death, the violence of his world, the loneliness of power. She told him about Jake, about the life she'd imagined before everything changed. One evening she asked him to meet Jake. He'd returned to Seoul for business. Seung-jun agreed, no jealousy, no possessiveness. They met at a cafe, shook hands, talked civilly. Take care of her, Jake said. She deserves everything. I know, Seung-jun replied. I'm trying to be worthy of that. It was closure, real closure, and it freed them both. 6 months after that conversation in the cafe, Seung-jun took Aria to a small traditional Korean venue. 15 people attended. Her parents, who he'd flown in and apologised to personally, and his mentor, Jae-sung, a few close friends, no Hana, no business associates, just people who genuinely cared. He wore traditional hanbok. She wore a dress that accommodated her 8-month belly. They wrote their own vows this time. "I can't promise I'll be perfect," he said. "I can't promise I won't struggle with fear and control. But I can promise I will choose you every day. Not because of contracts or obligation, but because you are the bravest person I know. And I am honoured, truly honoured, to build a life with you." She spoke next. "I choose you knowing exactly who you were and who you're becoming. I choose you knowing it won't always be easy. But I choose you because you proved that people can change when they want to badly enough. Because you showed up every day." And that's what love actually is. Choosing to show up, even when it's hard. They exchanged rings, simple bands, no diamonds, just commitment. The kiss was soft, gentle, equal, no possession, no dominance, just partnership. 3 weeks later, their daughter arrived. The labour was long, difficult. Seung-jun stayed through all of it, holding her hand, whispering encouragement in Korean and English, his face pale with worry. When the baby finally came, screaming and perfect, the nurses placed her on Aria's chest. Seung-jun looked at his wife and the child she'd brought into the world, and tears streamed down his face. "She's beautiful," he whispered. "Do you want to hold her?" He nodded, unable to speak. The nurse showed him how to support her head, how to cradle her safely. He held his daughter, not his biologically, but his in every way that mattered, and something fundamental shifted in him. "Thank you," he said to Aria, "for trusting me with this, with her, with you." "We're a family now," Aria said, "a real one." 6 months later, their apartment was in chaos. Baby toys scattered everywhere, laundry piled on the couch, dishes in the sink. It was imperfect and messy, and nothing like the sterile mansion he used to live in. It was home. Seung-jun sat on the floor, their daughter, they'd named her Mia, sleeping against his chest. Aria watched from the doorway, her heart full. "What are you thinking?" she asked. "That I almost lost this? That my fear and pride almost cost me everything that actually matters?" She sat beside him, leaning her head on his shoulder. "But you didn't lose it. You fought for it. We fought for it," he corrected. You set the boundaries, made me earn it, didn't let me manipulate my way back in. Someone wise once told me that love isn't possession, it's choice." He kissed her forehead. "Every day I choose this. Choose you. Choose us." Mia stirred, made a small sound. They both froze, then relaxed when she settled back to sleep. "She has your nose," Aria said softly, "and your strength." He looked at his wife. "I love you. I should have said it months ago, years ago, but I'm saying it now. I love you, Aria. Not because you're my wife, but because of who you are. Your courage, your kindness, your refusal to accept anything less than you deserved. I love you too, the real you, not the armour, not the power, just you." They sat together in the quiet apartment, their daughter sleeping peacefully between them. Their family existed, built not on contracts or arrangements, but on choice, on respect, on love that had been earned through consistent action, not grand gestures. A family, imperfect, real, together, finally visible to each other in all the ways that mattered. So that's it, lovelies. She demanded respect and he learned to give it. She walked away and he learned what he should have known from the beginning. You can't control someone into loving you. You can only become someone worthy of being chosen. This isn't a story about a powerful man rescuing a helpless woman. It's about a woman who saved herself, and a man who did the hard work of becoming someone worth coming back to. That's not fantasy. That's real love, built on boundaries, on consistent action, on choosing each other every single day. If you love stories about redemption earned, not given, about women who refuse to settle and men who learn to deserve them, hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment below. Do you think he deserved a second chance? What would your conditions have been? Thank you for watching, lovelies. Until next time, remember, you are never too broken to rebuild. You are never too lost to find your way home. And you are always, always worth choosing. See you in the next story.